Guten Morgen allerseits. Good morning, everyone. My name is Guido Braam. I'm the executive of the Circular Economy. And indeed, that is a not-for-profit cooperative that wants to speed up the transition towards a circular economy. And it's a real privilege that I have the opportunity here to speak to you for 15 minutes or so and introducing you some of our insights and some of our lessons learned, and specifically focus on the Amsterdam region. We are surrounded here today with these great minds in the audience. The Commissioner and the Minister of Environment left us, but there are these great thinkers in the audience here, like Ken Webster, and you just heard Stuart Whitman. And I'm happy to see that there are also great practitioners here, like Martine Posma from the Repair Café. And that's the bottom line of my story today. I think sometimes we see people who do both. And Gunther Pauli is not here yet, but he will close today, and he's a typical example of somebody who can think about the circular economy, what it looks like, and really brings that into practice. And before I start talking about the Amsterdam case, which would have been lovely to present that together with Evelyn Jonkhoff from the municipality of Amsterdam, but unfortunately she could not be here. I'd like to share some lessons learned with you. We have been building up this circular economy startup, this not-for-profit cooperative, and we discovered so many lessons learned, and I'd just like to share 3 with you. And the first one is, this is a system change. Well, and perhaps it's good to mention as well that this was just a great presentation of Stuart Whitman introducing the circular economy in general. And I already saw that in the program that will happen, so I will focus a little bit more on the transition as well as the examples. But I'd like to share 3 lessons learned that we encountered the last 3 years. And the first one is a system change, and we all recognize that perhaps. But we discovered that nobody can do this alone. Not a multinational. Philips is also a member of ours, or DSM, or AXO. Nobody can do this alone. Not the Dutch government, not an individual, not even the European Committee. We need a system change, and therefore we established a neutral platform, a multi-stakeholder platform where on neutral grounds we really can make things happen. We have now over 40 members, and mostly there are businesses, multinationals, these SMEs with their long-term perspective, and these innovative startups like Grow Mushrooms, who makes from organic waste food, a very interesting concept. We have the banks and the pension funds of the Netherlands joined us, and we also work together with universities. And last year, the Dutch government got heavily involved in our ambition to make the Netherlands a circular hotspot. We spoke to the Prime Minister last year, who opened the Hannover Messe yesterday as well, and he was very enthusiastic about the concept, and that as a result from that meeting, we were able to set up a Green Deal called the Netherlands as a Circular Hotspot, but also to start a national program with our Socio-Economic Council to see whether it's possible to really be a front-runner in the Netherlands. And that obligates us to really put our money where our mouth is, but it also, I would like to challenge then the rest of the world to follow. This system change also demands something of our mindset. We are used to exclusive thinking. We are used to thinking in terms of competition. But we're now working on a bigger purpose, and we are running out of time. So now it's time to think more inclusive, to think more how we can support each other rather than compete each other. And the second lesson learned was more a personal one. Our members are obligated to start up a circular project. And by doing that, I personally believed that the circular economy would come by itself. Creating meaningful examples, you just saw some, was Light as a Service from Philips, or getting rid of residual paint of AkzoNobel. I thought if we do these projects, then we will learn together, we will create meaningful, inspiring examples, and the rest will follow. And we will also be encountering these barriers on law and regulation or in finance, for instance, but we will tackle them one by one on this multi-stakeholder platform. But I had to be honest, after a while we started to discover that in order to do this, we really need to zoom out. Where are the changes in the system? Do we want to help a milk company with their manure problem? And I don't have a picture of manure, you probably know what it looks like or smells like. but we like to zoom out on the total dairy industry and to look at it and then ask ourselves the question, where are the real leverage points? Where are the tipping points? Where do we really find the impact, and how do we measure that? So we developed this circle scan, and then that enabled us also by visualizing these material flows to ask questions not so much on the end of pipeline, more of the beginning of the pipeline. Do these nutrients really have to come from South America for our Dutch cows to produce milk? Or is there a more smarter way to feed the people on Earth? And do we want our scarce land in the Netherlands to be used for livestock? Or can we use it smarter, in a smarter way? So this circle scan really helped to zoom out and to take a look at it from a system perspective. And there's this other point, the system perspective is one thing, but we need to approach it in a holistic manner. Often we're talking about energy use or material use, but we rather look at the total picture of biodiversity, toxicity. What does it mean for health and happiness? That's part of the scan we developed. And I won't go into depth of all these projects. I'm happy to tell you more about it after this event. But what I do like to share with you is that for us it was very important to find projects that can really be a game changer. And proud to say that more and more of our projects are becoming these big system change potential projects. And one of them I want to highlight is the circular investment strategy we're doing together with the biggest pension fund in the Netherlands. And the difference there is that we take the future state into account, and that we look how a fund manager can invest and can assess from the future perspective, instead of excluding companies and looking backward, looking forward and incentivize. And we're talking about billions here. So if we can get that change going on, things will start to change more rapidly than just my few examples. This is an example of the circle scan holistic approach. Too much detail. There's a last lesson learned I'd like to share with you, and that is the most important message I'd like to address here. It doesn't have to do anything with explaining you what a week looks like. I want to explain to you that we thought in the beginning that we needed to be a think tank to think about the circular concept, and there are a lot more nuances needed in the circular economy. It's not like if we go to a performance management that all of a sudden, to a leasing economy, that we have the circular economy. We need to be more nuances. We need to have more nuances on how to use material use. Repair is not always the best solution if you take energy into account. But that's the first thing we did when we started up 3 years ago. For the last couple of years, we really put the focus on action, bring it into practice. These examples of the dairy industry, light as a service, residual paint, all these examples, the built environment. And we really said we need to be focusing on bringing it into practice, do the action part. But now we discover we have to do both. So I'd like to challenge you as well. I'd like to challenge you that you are inspired on a Monday and a Tuesday, here, today, tomorrow. Think about the concept. Think even further what it means if we have a circular economy. But please, as an individual, be involved in the implementation. Or do the implementation yourself on a Wednesday, a Thursday, and a Friday. And then on the Saturday, I'd like to challenge you to really act. With a shovel in your hand, create this circular economy yourself. And then yes, on a Sunday you can have a day of rest. You can enjoy with your family and friends and look backward and see how you improve the world bit by bit. We try to do the same. Yes, we're developing a circularity framework, which is the core of the investment strategy, but also can help our decision making for business models or for designers. That will be published soon. And this you cannot read, of course, but this is an example of how we create a closed loop for textiles. We bring it into practice on a Wednesday, Thursday, and a Friday. And we bring it into practice also by, we had a contest where you could win 100 square meters of circular office, which is a collaboration between Desso, Philips, Hayward. Let's bring it into practice. It will be opened in April. But also act on a Saturday. We're building our office self at the Keuvel, and I will come back to that later on as an example in Amsterdam. And I happened to find one picture where I was actually working. This is the only one. But this is building our own retrofitted woonboot on a self-sufficient urban environment. And we'll come back to that later on. This is the team then. Now going more into depth of this Amsterdam case. Because we did the same thing there. First, you need to zoom out to see what the potential is of an urban environment. And it was already mentioned by Stuart Whitman that 50% now live in an urban context, and presumably 75% will live in an urban context in 2050. So that means the cities are really the key to change towards a circular economy. We really need to find solutions because the city right now is importing energy and materials and is exporting waste. And we need to find solutions where cities are more self-sufficient in terms of producing, not only consuming. And if you look at Amsterdam, it's a city of 800,000 inhabitants. But if you look at the total metropolitan area, it's 2.3 million. And if you look at the Netherlands, we have 16.5 million inhabitants altogether. The Netherlands is more a city-state than it is a country like Germany. We have several big cities. Utrecht is here as well, with Rotterdam, Eindhoven. We are a city-state. So the Netherlands could actually be a great example how to develop something in an urban context. If you look at Amsterdam, the average inhabitant produces 1.15 kilos of waste per day. That's a little bit more than the average in the Netherlands. And it has to do mainly because, well, 50% in the Netherlands is reused. The other part is put in an incinerator, and there's only minus 1% that is actually ends up as landfill. Amsterdam scores a little bit less on this percentage, and that has to do with the fact that it is a city with high density, some old buildings, and also with a lot of high-rise. The good news is then that in the Netherlands we were able to be a front runner in domestic waste disposal. Germany beats us in the source separation, but we were able to prevent landfill. Of course, that's not very circular. Neither is the burning of valuable resources. But then it's good to take a better look at Amsterdam itself and the incinerators they have. In the Netherlands, we have an overcapacity of incinerators. And Amsterdam has one of the most efficient incinerators there are. They're burning 1.4 million kilotons of waste per year. But since there is a shortage of waste in the Netherlands, we import it from the UK. 295 kilotons are imported from UK. Is that a bad thing? Otherwise it would end up as landfill. But still, if we are ambitious on the circular economy, we of course want to prevent that it's even burned, that we reuse it again. But then you encounter, of course, the difficulty of that 5 years ago, this waste energy company in Amsterdam was tapped on the shoulder and said, well, you're doing a great job incinerating this in such an efficient way, because they provide 75% of the electricity in Amsterdam. And 12,000 households make use of the warmth of this incinerator. So one of the challenges is, of course, the invested interest. We could talk about the concept of the circular economy, but we do have to recognize there will also be losers in this transition, and we have to find solutions for them. So we zoomed out to Amsterdam to look at its potential, and then when you zoom out and you show these resource maps, all of a sudden you see that we have a flower auction where there are a lot of residual organic waste that was thrown away. You had to pay for it to throw it away. It's comparable with the manure story I just told you. But now we see that there's also a biorefinery in the harbors of Amsterdam, and that we can actually use that and make it more valuable. And in Amsterdam, the funny thing is, well, I will come back to that later. In Amsterdam, we zoomed out to see this potential in terms of water, energy, material flows. I won't go into detail of that, but it's funny to see that Amsterdam formulated this ambition in a program for the next 4 years. It's called the Circular Metropole. And they described already their ambitions they already had on energy use and renewable energy. But they also said, what can we do to make this circular economy happen within our city? They described, well, they made a distinction between two things. They can play their classical role. They can see what they can do in terms of law and regulation, permits, etc., and how they can facilitate the city, and how they can facilitate the bottom-up movement, because they do recognize that this transition is not a